Okay. Ollie, are we ready to go? Brilliant. Okay, well, let's just start here. I'll bring on this title card just for, not just because, I spent 2 years getting in shape, but also because in terms of the numbers, and you're talking about like the top 10. So you're talking about an approach which, might be called a named account approach or a target account approach, where you've got this limited number of places that maybe you want to get into. Now, that's a definitely viable approach, and cold calling can definitely work there, and we can kind of explode upon that as we go through later. The frame I want to give today is from a point of view of seeing that essentially cold calling at its essence is a numbers game. So we're looking at an introduction to your first 500 calls in this way. So if you're looking at a market, for instance, I'm working with a SaaS business at the moment where one part of their market probably only has 20 people in it. They don't employ me to call those 20 people because, it's such a small number, and realistically, you would get through, all the numbers you'd have in that in a day. You've not got really anywhere to go. So there is a caveat with this, which is that the method that I pursue and what I'll talk about here, on the one hand, is specifically designed towards numbers. And I've made over 5,000 cold calls in the last 6 months now, and that's where I'll be coming from. It's also very B2B focused. So that's the sort of framing for that way. However, if you were to need to go to B2C, or if you were looking at a total market, which was quite limited, the process is still the same. You obviously just have to look at it slightly differently in terms of how you maybe approach each call, or maybe just getting your sea legs first and then going into the conversations that really count. So I hope that addresses it, Ollie. And as we go through, I'll give a bit more detail. So yeah, this is an introduction today to really getting your first 500 calls. As I say, I'm not sure who on the call has done cold calling much, what kind of level you're at, but let's just start at this level as if it's an introduction and we'll go along. So if we're going to look at this, really, as I said before, we really need to know three things. We need to know, why are we going to do this? What's the point of making any kind of cold call at all, especially in the day and age when we've got AI and automation and digital contact tools. Then I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to me and where I've come from into doing this. And then we'll look at the how. And the how is basically what I do. So there's lots of people out there I know, and I see a lot of advice from people who maybe used to do it and don't do it anymore, or who have a theory for how it should work and they don't do it on a daily basis. What I'm going to take you through is literally what I was doing, 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago. I'm in the middle of it right now, and I'll talk about that as well. So this is typically where most people are when I speak to them about cold calling, from SaaS business owners all the way through to sales teams even. They don't want to be the guy making that call that nobody wants to have. And I think this is where a lot of what I'll talk about will engage with, because ultimately it's about framing what you're doing in a different way. If you're coming into it thinking nobody wants to have this call, then of course, nobody's going to want to have that call. So we need to look at it in several different ways to make sure that you're not coming at it with that mindset. And as I say, that's what we'll go through. But let's start off with talking about why. Why would you do this terrible thing, this awful thing of picking up the phone, bothering other people, talking to strangers, and putting yourself out there at the risk of rejection? I see, to begin with, that there are two key reasons for this. The first reason for cold calling is because you need to test what you have. You've got to take your idea, your concept, whatever it is you're trying to put out there. If you're at startup level, you're essentially at that level where something is looking good and you've probably got some traction, but it hasn't necessarily got market penetration yet. That is not going to happen through LinkedIn content. It's not going to happen through TikTok videos. You need to be out there in the market because people tell the truth when you actually ask them for money. So the amount of people through my, 10, nearly 9 years of self-employment that I said, I've got this idea. How is this going to work? Do you think this sounds like a good idea? That said, yeah, go for it. Or that said, oh, if you do this little bit or change this little bit, I'll go for it. And then never followed through as a client. When you actually call people, when you interrupt them and you get in front of them, you get out into the market and you say, will you pay for this? Will you give time to this? They'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you how they feel, and they'll be able to tell you what they actually want, what actually resonates with them. Excuse me, I'm suffering with a bit of flu today. They'll be able to tell you what actually resonates for them. So we're going to take what we've got and test it in the market. And this is another reason why you need that big long list. So you need a big market to address in terms of cold calling for this stage to be most effective, because you need loads of people to talk to and the ability to make mistakes and to find out that what you're doing is wrong or, misguided, so that other people can tell you. The second reason is to discover, to learn from the market. There's a quote from a comedian, quite an old quote now, which is, I don't have to be a genius. I don't have to know what is funny. The audience tells me what's funny. And it's the same with the market. Nobody has to be a genius. Nobody has to figure out what the market wants, because it will tell you. So if you go out and you test and you get people to pay money or to pay time and attention to what you do, then you're learning. And then you might actually learn something that you didn't even know. So you can discover things by getting out there, not trying to figure them out all on your own in these four walls. Find the answer out there in the market and discover what the market tells you that it wants. So these are the two key reasons that I pursue cold calling. They're the two key reasons that people employ me to do cold calling, is because they're getting things out into the market more than just sat behind the desk. And then they're learning from the market and I'm giving them feedback. I call this high definition feedback. When you're on an email, when you're on a DM, even when you're on, any kind of content that's digital, you're getting low definition feedback. You're getting yes and no's, binary answers, and you can't read into those. Even on a phone call, you're getting nuances and responses and real-time reactions that give you a high definition feedback, give you a level of understanding from people that you simply can't get from any digital asynchronous kind of method. So those are the two reasons that you would do cold calling. But what the hell do I know? Who the hell am I? So I say I've been self-employed for about 9 years. I've run several different types of businesses, ideas of businesses, but things have only really started to kick off for me in the last sort of 12 months as I've really leaned into the sales space. And essentially it's because everything that I was doing before was trying to do what I'm not doing now. I wasn't testing in the market. I wasn't learning from the market. I wasn't out there looking at what it actually wanted. And this is what it looks like at the moment. So this is what I'm doing. Every single time I make a call, I make a tally mark. I'll explain why when we come on to it later, but this is just a few examples of the weeks and months about what I've been working on and how I've been recording what I'm doing. And these are my calls at the moment. So at the moment, I'm about 5,200 calls. 24%, that calls to conversations level there, that's how many people that I want to talk to have picked up the phone and actually talked to me. And I only call mobile numbers. There's really not much point calling any other number. And I'll again talk about that in a minute. 53 appointments during that time. So it's roughly about one appointment in every 100 calls. Now that's my area of improvement that I'm looking at the moment. By the end of this year, I want to get to 1.5. And my ultimate goal, a very good level for an SDR, is to get 2 bookings for an appointment in every 100 calls. So at the moment, this is where I'm at. I'm making the calls, I'm recording the calls, and I've got idea of where I want to be in the calls. And a lot of these appointments go nowhere. That's the other side of this. So there are at the moment across my 4 or 5 clients, I've got 7 sales negotiations that are going on, and we're just about to make 1 sale go through. So that's in 6 months, 5,000 calls, 1 sale. This is the other reason why cold calling is a bit of a numbers game, especially if you're at the sort of enterprise level, sales of tech level that I'm at. It's not something you're going to see lots of sales happen on. You're going to see those sales cycles move through. And so you're going to have that momentum, which again is why I'll talk about these boards in a minute. So that's who I am. That's where I'm at. And this is what I'm doing now. I'm essentially giving founders a way out of founder-led sales. Now, you need founder-led sales. As I said, you test, you learn. But at the same time, there's a lot of legwork involved. And that's where I come in, because the sales appointments are where you get a lot more rich feedback from your market. And obviously, the market feedback that you're getting on a lower level is from those calls. But you wouldn't have to pick up the call. That's where I come from. and then you would be going into the sales appointments. So that's what I'm doing now. And essentially, it's all led through to the best advice I had in 9 years of running my own businesses was this. I don't think I was ready for it until just recently. It was go find a client. Stop all the content writing, stop all the strategizing, stop trying to think of the perfect process. FFS, just go find a client. And that really, if you need any other reason to do cold calling, that is probably the best reason to do cold calling. It is the most direct way to get out there and try and find a client. And again, I am talking B2B here. I am talking that kind of mass market approach here, or at least a large market approach here. But it is a great reason to call, and it's a great reason to get better at it. So how do you do this thing? How are you actually going to go ahead and make these calls? The thing is, to really start with, it isn't about how, it's about who. This is very much a state of garbage in, garbage out. Your pickup rates, your conversation rates, the quality of feedback you get will all come from the quality of the input of the data. And you will not be able to create proper data, really good data, unless you have a clear ICP. And by that, I don't mean age-wise or, what they drive or anything like that. What I'm really talking about is triggers. So what external factors are changing the way that they act at the moment, what are having an impact on their decision-making processes at the moment, and also psychographic elements. So, what do they want? What's on the top of their Trello board project list? What's actually really important to them? Once you get into that, and you don't need to be perfect, you can have a best guess. Like we say, we're testing and learning. But once you have an idea of what you're going out there to actually test or to find out, or what kind of project you're actually trying to engage with that somebody has, you're going to get a lot better feedback. And really, when you've got this ICP, this very clear ICP, and you've got ways of recognizing what that looks like, that's when you're going to be able to create those names and numbers. That's when you're going to be able to get those lists together. And to begin with, you need at least 100. You need at least 100 to get your sort of road miles in, to get your legs into this, so that you can test and learn and experience what's going on before you can really maybe make a decision about either changing your direction, your positioning, or whatever. And I do think mobiles are a must. There's another school of thought which is about going through switchboards and making friends with switchboards. Again, to call back to what Ollie said at the beginning, that might be good for named accounts, for these big accounts that you want to nurture and get into over a long period of time. But also, you probably want to get used to doing the cold calling before you get into there. So you need mobiles, you need direct numbers. If you're going through switchboards, you're going to waste a huge amount of time. You're never going to hit that magic number of sort of 75 calls a day if you're having to deal with switchboards all the time. So that's where we start. We start with a clear ICP. Next, we've got the awkward. That awkward thing before you make the call, when they pick up on the call, what are you going to say? Again, there's loads of ideas about this. One of the strongest ideas is the permission-based opener, which I really don't like. And I really don't like it because if I ask you for permission to talk when you have no idea about what I'm going to talk about, I haven't given you any indication about what that might be, I'm forcing you to make an awkward decision. I'm forcing you to make a decision based on almost no information. And in my experience, permission-based openers just aren't what they are, held up to be. It's a waste of time. So what I use is a prompt and an invitation. So the prompt is you've already made some kind of connection with them. Sometimes you can tweak this and sort of cheat and actually assume you've made some kind of a connection you haven't. But essentially, connect on LinkedIn, send them an email, go to an event and get the event list, or just get the event list. And then you're going to open it up with, hi, I'm Ben, I'm calling from this company, or, is that Steve? Hi, I'm Ben, I'm calling from this company. I think we just connected on LinkedIn, or we met briefly at this event, or I'm hoping you've had an email from my CEO this week. Now, the thing is, I'll be honest with you, I do this all the time, and there's not always an action behind it. The LinkedIn thing might not have happened. The event, I might not have even been there or met them. The point is not whether it's truthful, and this is where there's a bit of a game going on. The point is not whether it's truthful. The point is the next question. You're setting it up with I think this is true, and then you're asking them, I don't know if you remember that. I don't know if you remember me from that event. I don't know if you remember my CEO from the email that you should have received from him. Now, typically they're going to say no, and that's great. That's exactly where you want to be. You want to be in a situation where the first question you ask them is actually a question that any answer is valid. You can deal with anything. If they say no, you go, oh, that's okay, don't worry. I don't know about you, LinkedIn's incredibly difficult to keep up with. How is it going with you? You're basically already in a conversation. Rather than make a cold call and be awkward, and my first cold call, I started with a pitch. Are you ready to do? And it was a disaster. It was dreadful, and I vowed never to do that again. Now, when I start a cold call, it's not really even a cold call, it's a reconnection. It's an invitation for them to talk. And by showing that I've got space for them to talk, I'm also showing that I'm confident for them to tell me anything. So we start off with this prompt, we start off with this question, and we give them space to talk. So they're already not feeling like most people do on a cold call, which is they're being broadcast to. You're giving them the space. They say no, it's okay, you can deal with that. They say yes, fantastic. You can go on from that. And I have actually seen really good results from running a Dripify campaign where you have someone connect on LinkedIn, send a message once they've connected, and then you call up afterwards. That seems to be, the best thing that's working for me now. Next, you need to show them, to prove to them that you've considered their time and that you're worth it. This is again why I don't like permission-based openers. If you do a permission-based opener, you're putting all the responsibility on them. Is now a good time? Or is now a bad time? Or all that kind of stuff. Better to have spent the time before you call, coming up with something, what I call a use case, which is relevant to them, it's very quickly over with, and it's not bullshit. It's not marketing nonsense, it's just really clear. And essentially, the best way to start with this is we provide a way to. So you've done the introduction, you've done the invitation, you've allowed them to speak, you've maybe had a little bit of rapport building there, only a couple of seconds, if that. And then you say, well, I'm calling because, or you just go straight into it. Well, we provide a way to. And the function of this structure is that by talking that way, you're not making a boast, you're not starting off with some sort of marketing jargon, you're trying to connect it directly to something they're already doing. So here are some examples. These are some live projects that I'm working on at the moment. We provide a way to outsource value engineering. We provide a way to simplify resource allocation. We provide a way to turn up volume on B2B outreach. That one's mine. So the point is not to find the snazziest, cleverest way to do whatever you're doing or to say it. The point is to demonstrate to them that you're not calling for a nonsense reason, you're calling for a relevant reason, and you're going to make that relevant reason incredibly sharply and incredibly quickly. Then you can either follow it up with, do you have time to talk about that? I don't know if that sounds interesting to you. You're essentially, now you're able to ask that question, if you want to do that permission-based question. Now you're able to ask that question because they have all the information. But this will have happened in less than 5 seconds. So you're already into this conversation. They've already got everything they need. Now you can start the conversation. Now, typically, the conversation is not going to go well. So it's not going to go to the place where they go, oh, amazing, that sounds perfect. And then, you go on. Typically, they're either going to misunderstand, they're either going to jump to conclusions that aren't quite right, or they're just not the right time for them, or they don't want to talk. So you've got to get happy with digging. Now, sometimes, again, you can use this, is this a bad time, or have you got time to answer that? Sometimes you just go with it. Trust the fact you've built a connection to begin with. So you lean straight into it, make assumptions. If they say no, oh, I'm guessing that you're, all sorted for leads then. I'm guessing you've got leads coming out of your ears. Or so you're not struggling for business then right now. Now, the reason about making an assumption is if I assume something that is not true, it's in our nature to want to correct me. So people will leap in. The next thing you can do is if they just say no thanks, if that's the first thing they say, this is quite a good one I found. Oh, can I ask what made it so easy to say that? Then you get that little bit more information. You get that, well, it's because of this. And that might tell you everything you need to know. I'm just seeing some stuff spot up into the chat. Yes, we can go back. Mike, what was it you wanted to have a look at in the last slide?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm just trying to whilst you're talking, write my own script. And
Okay.
yeah, I just missed this piece, so I just wanted to come back a sec. But yeah, you're fine to crack on. I've got it. I've got
Sure,
it.
fantastic. You got it. And happy, I know we're running out of time, so I'll crack on, but happy to talk about that in a minute. So let's go back. So yes, so dig into no thanks. Can I ask what made it so easy to say that? Really good place to start. You can also do this. You can just say, well, this is what we do. Is now a bad time? Again, you can bring that permission in now because you've given them the information. Is now a bad time to ask how you do this? So with the client I was mentioning, it's a resource allocation platform. What I really want to know is, are they doing it already? How is it going already? Is it working well for them? So can I talk about how you do it? Oh, you use spreadsheets. Okay, is that working well for you? Oh, it's not. Oh, okay, well that's where we come in. But you're only going to get there with some digging. So you need to get comfortable with the digging and sometimes this slightly self-deprecating approach, not doing yourself down, but putting yourself into a less of an authority position. Well, I'm wrong about this, aren't I? I'm guessing that this, and so on. So that's a good place to be. Next, you want something really easy. If it does go well, or if there's some way to move this forward, you want a really easy call to action. Essentially, you're going to invite them to a demo. You're not trying to sell them on this call. That's the big difference with a lot of, cold calling that might be out there. You're not trying to get a decision there because it's actually almost impossible. What you're trying to get them is to something a bit longer. And this is what's called a test close. You've probably heard that before. If you say, great, we've had a good conversation, maybe we could hop on a demo, just 20 minutes. If they say yes, obviously it's a good indicator you've hit something that resonates with them. And the point about a demo is not really to repeat what you've been before, but what you want to do is use that demo to demonstrate how you're going to transform their business. You can hint at this in the call to action, but essentially when you go into the demo, you've organized it, you're jumping on the call, you're then going to be making that connection between this is where you begin, this is what it's like working with us, and this is what it looks like at the end. So that's where you're going to end that call. And this is where those boards come in. If you're going to do this terrible thing, this horrible thing, which even every Monday morning, my first 15 calls are like dragging myself through, broken glass. You can't rely on motivation because it doesn't finish the job. We're wired to repeat things that feel good, and calling does not feel good. So you need to control the rewards you get from it, and that'll help you be consistent. And I use what are called micro, milestone, and success rewards. And this is an example of a micro reward. So every dash, if you've ever read Atomic Habits, every dash my brain recognizes as a micro reward. I'm getting somewhere. And when I look back at this, I can see that I've got somewhere. So that's a micro reward. It's helping me build momentum. A milestone reward might be the end of the week, or you'll like this. Every time I book a demo, I ring a bell. It's silly, right? It's silly, but the brain is silly. And you have to have things that reward you to keep you going. So I ring the bell, and that just gives me that moment where I have booked a demo. Now I'm on the other side of that. That's a milestone reward. And then obviously a success reward is, well, I've done 6 months, I've hit my 5,000 calls, I've booked a holiday with my son. I'm not exactly going on holiday because of what I do, but I also couldn't go on holiday if I didn't do what I do. And so linking those things is very important. I could go into rewards for hours and hours, but I won't because we're just almost out of time. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to jump in now. They're my details. I'll let you there for a moment. Anybody got any questions?
I've got one if I may.
Yeah, James, please come in. I'm just going to stop sharing so we've got the full screen.
Might be seems to me the white elephant in the room, but I might have it completely wrong. But how do you go about gathering 5,000 mobile numbers for the people you actually want to speak to?
Well, 5,000 is a big number to start with. So first of all, don't start with 5,000, right? The first company I worked with, they actually did have a CRM, which was about 10 years old. They've been going for that long, and they just gathered all these names. So they did actually, funnily enough, have about 5,000, and I've been working my way through them. But the best place to start, I've got a little, it's not always perfect, but I've got a little template that I've used for some of the ones that I've done over Fiverr. So if you find, a data miner, you can just, as long as you describe it correctly, and I can share that template with anybody who wants it. You get basically thanks very much, Dan. You can basically get some results back from that. it can be like £20 for say 50 numbers, and if you expect 50% of them to be rubbish, you'll be onto a decent thing. There are also other ways of doing it. Sales Navigator and a thing called Ciro, Ciro. You can link those two together, put in a description of what you want. It will generate a big list of people, and then you can, with a charge, obviously, push it through Ciro and it will find numbers. So there are ways of doing it. I tend to stay away from the data generation and rely on my clients providing it.
Right. From a point of view of, we've got our own businesses, and if I need to go and make some phone calls, I need to identify who those people are. Then I need to understand the best way to call them. And like you say, you rightly say, and this was going to be my other call, is it's very easy to get a phone number for a company, but it's not very easy to get a phone number for an individual.
Yeah, I think
And
Tom
then
in and said exactly the same
yeah,
thing. It's difficult to get the mobiles. Okay, so GDPR. Now, I'm not an expert, and again, this is one of the reasons why I don't jump into the data, but I do. One of my clients is quite well versed on this. GDPR is a great function, but it has a huge amount of gray area. If I call you and it's about something that's relevant, and if you ask, agree to remove you and never call you again, I'm GDPR compliant, as I understand it. GDPR is supposed to stop people calling willy-nilly with no purpose and just, kind of shooting into the ether. The point is that if you've got it for a valid reason, if you've got a valid interest in contacting that person because what you do is relevant to them, then ultimately you are in that gray area. Again, if you're really worried about it, is it ICO? Join the ICO organization. They're the people who kind of organize it. Get some professional sort of advice. But the point is that if you are reported for calling a mobile number, the thing you need to make sure you've got is a list of similar people that have a similar reason for you calling them that are all to do with what you do, and demonstrate that you've then deleted that person's number or you've marked it as never called again. That's the advice I've been given. I'm trying to keep up with it, but ultimately, if you're just calling one person and you're happy to get off the phone when they ask you to, and mostly if you're polite to people, that won't happen. Typically, GDPR, as I say, is a grey area. So, play in that grey area at your own risk, but it is a big grey area. Let's have a look. Patrick, used to be able to buy data from industry publications. If you know your target audience, likely to read a certain. Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's back to target audiences again. If you know there's an industry magazine out there that has a readership that fits with your ICP, and again, the thing about having an ICP is as soon as you've got that specificity, it starts to throw up things that you can find them in. Then, that might be a good way to go. Apollo. Apollo as good as any. I use Ciro just because it's easy, and I find Apollo gives me awful headaches. I don't know how to use it properly. It makes me sick. So Ciro, Ciro. The reason I like that is because one of the main reasons it exists is to plug into LinkedIn. So I go to a LinkedIn profile, click a button on there, and it tries to find the number for that LinkedIn profile. Lemlist, yeah. I mean, they're all basically working from the same databases. So yeah, they're all pretty much the same. Todd.
Yeah, I've got a couple of really great opportunities coming up in the next 2 weeks. Next week is the Climb UK event in Leeds over 2 days with thousands of attendees across all different businesses. The week after is the Bread and Jam Festival in London for FMCG food businesses. And at those events, it's a great opportunity for cold calling in person, essentially.
Yeah.
What would be, I mean, I usually start off with a hook, rather. I make a dessert sauce or a hot sauce for ice cream, but people put it everywhere. So, I don't want to walk up and tell them what I do right away. What's the better approach when you're in person doing a cold call, essentially?
I mean, basically what you just said. So I was at what's it called? Digital Construction Week a few weeks ago. I was at an event called is it the United Land Institute? Or, I've done this a couple of times, and yeah, there's that moment again, the awkwardness where you're like, yeah, I don't want to just go. The point is, they're there.
Hmm.
They're there for the same reason you are, which is, we want to go out and have a little bit of a jolly at the same time, but also you're there trying to look for opportunities. So I think for me, and this is why I focus mostly on B2B, in fact, entirely on B2B, is because I don't feel sorry for calling somebody because that's business. It's just
Right.
business. I'm trying to do business, you're trying to do business. If somebody called me and said they've got something that's important and relevant to me, that's good. If someone approaches me and they've understood that something might be relevant to me, that's good. So I would sort of say that basically in person, you have a little bit more license to be a bit more like, oh, this is awkward, or can I interrupt, or can I introduce myself, or you're just a bit more human probably than a cold call. But if you've got a very small hook like that, and you can just say, oh, I do this. The one thing that might be more useful is, especially in the networking environments, is to ask them what they do first.
Absolutely.
And as much as you can go in and give a pithy hook or anything, if you go in and you ask them what they do first, then obviously, hopefully there will be a reciprocal question. Also, everybody has a name tag. So there's sometimes when it's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just reading your name tag. Where is it you come from? And that way, you've got a conversation started. Yeah, there's no rule for it, but I think if there is a rule, it's just that we're all there for the same reason and everybody expects to be approached. And anybody who doesn't expect to be approached, well, that's their loss almost for attending a public event, I would say. I know that's harsh, but I am a Viking, so.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Some brilliant questions there, Ben. And I've certainly seen the upside. Neil.
Yeah, sorry, just jumping in. I guess it's a couple of small questions. Thank you very much, Ben. Really interesting. And cold calls is something where it's one of those things that fills me with dread, either receiving them or making them. One around, I guess, kind of the new technologies that we have and doing research on somebody, because obviously rather than doing a lot of generic ones, do you find it useful to do research so that you can actually start a conversation where you actually know something about the person, or do people find that creepy? Are you using any kind of AI technologies or algorithms? I'm thinking a bit like, I'm working with an online dating company at the moment, and obviously there are a lot of algorithms to help you find your better match. And then finally, generational things. Gen Z don't like phones, don't like talking on phones. It's really weird. So how do you find cold calling adapting to people that don't like using the phone?
Let's go in reverse. Let's start with the Gen Z thing. So there is a level of generational sort of culture, admittedly, but I think it was Mark Ritson, the amazing marketer that I would recommend you all kind of look up. He said that people who love yo-yos have more in common with one another than millennials do. So there is no rule for a generation. There is just a sort of surface level kind of take of, oh, they're kind of like this. The truth of it as well is that nobody really likes a cold call. So you can't really say, I don't think that these people don't like cold calls or these people don't like cold calls. It's just that nobody really likes getting called from somebody they don't know. So as a cold caller, my responsibility, like I said, is to know that and then try and make it least unpleasant an experience as possible. And that's all about getting as clear as possible and getting as relevant as possible and as quickly as possible. So I don't have a problem with calling any generation. The point is not, do they like being on the call? Because to be honest, again, it is kind of business. I have to kind of not give a crap about that. I'm here to sell. I'm here to try and get them in. I'm not interested in whether they like talking on the phone. What I'm interested in is, will they pick up? And if they pick up, can I make sense to them and get their interest quite quickly? So in terms of when they answer, that's one of the reasons why I've found myself leaning into construction technology firms as well. Because in the world of construction, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people working, remotely and at sites. So they pick up mobile numbers, they pick up withheld numbers. So my pickup rates for construction technology are quite a lot higher than say the time I've spent calling into the States to consultancies, which were, really, really low and not really worth doing. Then in terms of AI processes and data generation, there's a company called Clay, I think you might have heard of, and they basically do a incredible bit of software which will scrape everything on a whole load of LinkedIn profiles and create a personalized DM to that person Like, oh, I saw you went to this place. Do you know this person? Oh, I saw you went to this event recently. Do you know this thing? Or, oh, I saw you went to this university. I studied the same kind of thing. So they will create that for you. I see that as just making cold calling more effective. If I can send that message and then follow up again with a cold call, that's great. And also, again, like I said, the thing about cold calling is because it's a numbers game, I like to keep research and action separate. I have this silly thing I call DAFT. You make a decision, you take an action, you get feedback from it, and only later do you think about it. It might not be good for crossing the road or any kind of like severe situation, but if you can make a decision on what you're going to do, I'm going to call these 100 people, call 100 people without really thinking about it, you will get much more effective, much more straightforward and efficient, and then you can kind of gather that feedback and think about it later and maybe change your strategy. So I see AI tools as enabling that. I think the point is that if you're then spending time getting into the depths of someone, working out what's going on, you know, where did they go? If you're spending a lot of time researching each prospect, then you call them, it's a wrong number, or it's not the right person, or it's not the right day, or they just say no, you've wasted all that time. So I suppose the overall answer is what you're looking for is a kind of a use case, like I said, that is as relevant as possible to as many people as possible all at once. And that's where I think you've got to think business level. Am I talking to, you know, the leadership level or the operative level? And that will influence it. If it's leadership level, I need to have an idea of what's their Trello project board or their Asana project board. Like what keeps them up at night? What are they actually coming into work and thinking, I got to get on with that? Because if you're calling about number 10 on their list, nobody's going to listen. But if you're calling about something that's on 1 or 2 position and they're thinking about it every day, it doesn't matter if you know where they went to school or what car they drove or you know what they posted on LinkedIn last week. None of that is relevant. What matters is that you're talking about something that's relevant to where they want to get to. So I would say a broader kind of research is important. Getting that data together is important, but then being able to play the numbers game and have that broadly relevant use case. And like I say, after about 30 conversations, you'll be able to say, this isn't relevant to the people I'm speaking to. Or you'll go, oh, okay, these people respond, QSs, quantity surveyors, for instance, in one project I'm doing, are responding really well to this phrasing, but really badly to this phrasing. Maybe I'll have separate use cases, just slightly separate for 2 different roles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Any additional questions for Ben whilst he's with us this morning? There must be something that.
Yeah, I've got more of a. It's more of a story, kind of tapping onto what you were just saying there, Neil. Where a couple of months ago, I to your point, Ben, I'll always send something before I make the cold call. So my emails and LinkedIn messages are automated. So I know that they will have been sent an email, and then it's a good way to kind of go, okay, look, I've sent you this, have you received it? And the reason that I want to chat to you in particular is because of X, Y, Z, because I'll have a quick look at their LinkedIn profile beforehand to make it relevant. But I rang the CEO of Dorchester Hotels Group. I mean, pretty high up, right? You know, wanted to speak to them. This is right at the top of one of the biggest 5-star hotel groups in the world. And he answered his mobile. And the first thing he said to me was, I hate it when people cold call me on my mobile. And I said, well, I have sent you emails. I have been trying to get hold of you otherwise. And I think the reason I'm calling you is going to be super relevant for you because, you know, I can see you did this and this is what we're trying to do. And I just wanted 5 minutes of your time. And he was actually really cool about it. And then he passed me on to the person that I needed to speak to. And when I spoke to that person with his authority to speak to them, like it instantly, like straight away, they were listening because you know, I'd got his say so. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting, Neil, to your point, you know, that he didn't want to receive the cold call, but actually the result from it was really positive.
The worst cold call I've ever had, the guy picked it up and said, how the fuck did you get this number? Like properly like that. And I said, I'm really sorry. We use several tools. I'm guessing this is your mobile number. You know, my name's Ben. I'm calling from this company. I think you may have, connected on LinkedIn with my CEO, and this is just the standard practice we do. I'm so sorry. This is why I'm calling. And he went, well, you should be talking to this person. Let me give you their mobile number. Just don't call me again. And so I was straight in. And it's that thing of, we don't want to do it. And it is horrible. And it is a terrible thing to do. That's why I've got this board to keep me going, because otherwise I would quit. I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't have that momentum. But you're right. People are generally polite. And I think it's also a cultural thing. So I have called into the US and I've called into India, very different experiences. But calling into the UK, there is a moment, I think, that anybody will give you just for the benefit of the doubt. And that's where I think you've got to come in and just demonstrate you've done a little bit of homework, a little bit of effort beforehand, not to be in this camp of, give me permission, but to be able to say, I'm calling for this reason. It's really specific. Sorry, I thought I was talking over somebody there. Sashi.
Yeah. So I've just built my product, a digital one, and I'm just trying to get it out. So very, very early stages of sales. And I've been doing this cold email. I haven't done cold calling. So this is why I was interested to see how this goes. And clearly it's not very pleasant. So, but you have a strategy that'll help. Do you have any idea how the cold email conversions work? I mean, you have data for your...
I have a rough idea. So often people come to me to get me to work for them because cold emailing is an absolute nightmare. And if you imagine that cold email to demo conversion rate might be 0.1%, my cold call to demo rate is 1%. Still small numbers, but actually the difference is vast. And also the other thing about cold emailing is what company I'm working with now, they came to me because they were basically managing 5 different email domains with 3 or 4 different email addresses per domain. Because as soon as you've sent a certain number of emails in a day, you can't keep going or you'll get slapped down and spam filters getting better and you'll just go. The other side of it, if I'm honest, I always send emails after I've spoken to somebody with follow-up information. I send it, if I haven't managed to get through to somebody sometimes, and I leave voice messages. On the whole, nobody reads emails and nobody listens to voice messages. So there's just very little point doing it. Cold calling is, I think, Mike said in there, the most effective outreach for them. The reason it's effective is because if I call you, I'm interrupting you. If I'm emailing you, I'm easy to ignore. And there are levels of using them together. So like I say, LinkedIn DMs and Dripify, and then you follow up like Mike was talking about. Or, you do stuff like you do an email campaign and then you call up. The project I'm on at the moment, I was on yesterday, they are sending, the people I'm calling will have received at least 2, if not 3 emails in the week that I will call them. They have never read them. And I've called over 250 numbers now. So it can work, but it can work at 0.1% of the time. So, you can do 10 times more effective work by getting on the cold call. It's still not enjoyable, but it is at least, that much more effective.
And Mike, could I ask you, how have you automated your LinkedIn posts, LinkedIn callings or emailing?
Yeah, I use a tool called Lemlist, which I've found quite useful.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you wanted me to show you how it works and how I use it, I'm more than happy to do that. But I think Ben's got so much knowledge that I've got like loads and loads of questions that I'd like to ask. Like, how do you make it more effective? I've had one campaign going out to over 1,000 people, and I've had very, very little response to it. And then you have one that really kind of clicks. And I think, to your point, there's no jumping in and there's a magic solution. If you're making 5,000 calls, you're going to get loads of data and loads of information from that then feeds in to improve the next 5,000.
It's that idea of sales and marketing having a contract between each other, right? So marketing, essentially, have you ever seen that meme from Rick and Morty where he's built this robot and the robot is completely sentient and it comes up to him and says, what is my purpose? And he says, you pass me the butter. And it goes, oh my God. You know, it's like complete ridiculous. But the purpose of marketing is to pass leads to sales. There is no other purpose for marketing. So marketing should be passing leads to sales. Sales should be saying these are not the right leads, or they like this particular thing, or, you know, they said this thing when I talked about this area. That goes back to marketing. Marketing makes a slightly different advert. It gets better leads. I mean, that's as simple as it needs to be, really. There doesn't need to be anything else going on. And I think the point with emails as well is, again, I said about that low definition feedback. You could send 100,000 emails and get no feedback whatsoever other than somebody clicked something. But you don't know why. You don't know if it was by accident. You don't know if they did anything once they clicked it, really. You don't know what was going through their heads. But you could make 100 calls and pretty much get 25 conversations, and those conversations would tell you more than any of that data from the email, because it would be richer, it'd be more high definition. Plus, if you then discovered that the use case you were talking about had nothing to do with whatever they were doing, that each one of those 25 people said, that's not a concern for me, or that's not something I do ever, you could stop using that information in your marketing and your emails. So you should be tailoring your marketing based on what the sales is going on, and then the marketing should be bringing in the leads that make sense for sales. Okay.
Very good. That's been amazing this morning, Ben.
My pleasure.
You're welcome back anytime. Really. How do people get in touch with you? Through us?
Yeah, so let's have a look. So if I go back to that slide, so my email is ben@getshitdone.fun. It was a great email idea when I came up with it, but it does suffer from firewall problems. But that's my email. Also, www.getshitdone.fun is my website. But probably the easiest way, I think, if you just put the Cold Call Viking into Google, you'll probably find me, or in LinkedIn, just the Cold Call Viking, and I'll be there as well. So yeah, not too difficult to find me, I hope. Or, you know, just reach out through Ollie as well.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Pleasure.
We'll have you back soon for part 2. I think that
Sounds
makes
good.
complete sense.
Yeah, well, what would be great is that actually after this, especially, if anybody has any specific areas they wanted to really delve into, let us know, and then we can focus on that rather than doing an overall sort of, you know, basic approach again.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
Ben, you're going to get a lot of love, big ups, and pats on the back on LinkedIn today. Get ready for that.
Thank you very much.
Our Startup to Stand Up team are going to get that going in a short while, and it would be good to have you back. As I say, it's been very good this morning, and I wanted to get you in as soon as I spoke to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend all, and enjoy, and we'll be distributing Ben's video early next week, I guess.
Take care.